Well, hello. I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to our program. Well, I hope things are moving along in your state as they are in ours here in Florida, where we do these programs from. We're here in phase 2, although I hear we're still having more cases found, but I think that's because there's more testing happening. I know here, I normally have my mask on when I go about our Priests for Life office. Our office is officially open now. Our Florida staff is back, so we're all excited. But we're still being very cautious. We have our masks on when we go about the building to leave our own office. Hand washing like crazy, doing all the different things. Of course, we have a little temperature thing to check if someone's not feeling good, make sure that they don't have a temperature. If they do, they have to go home, go to the doctor. And I hope and pray everything is working out for you too, where you are. I know if you haven't quite gotten to phase 1, or most states are just beginning there, it can be frustrating, but stick with it. It does get better, and I believe we are turning a corner as a nation. Our economy is opening, and things will get better. We're going to keep bringing our programming to you. Father Pavone is still doing Mass every day at 10 a.m., and it repeats at 6. And, of course, this program. And I hope you can join me on Thursday, because now every Thursday at 3:30, I do a special Just Ask Janet. You can ask me just about anything if you want, about abortion, euthanasia, pro-life movement. I also was a public school teacher for 12 years, early childhood my specialty, reading specialist, even for the parents who are still doing distance learning. I'd be trying to help you if I can. So remember, on Thursdays, Just Ask Janet. And I cannot be remiss without telling you to like me on Facebook, my fan page, Instagram, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Janet Morana. Well, today I went back into our archives and found another good interview that Father Pavone and I did for the Gospel of Life TV show we did for Sky Angel. Today's guest is Clenard Childress. He's a great friend of mine and Father Pavone for many decades. And he does a lot to do with the Black community, raising awareness about the damage abortion has done to the Black community. So let's take a look at that program now.
14 million lives taken in the African American community. Find out why next on Gospel of Life. Hello, this is Reverend Frank Pavone, Director of Gospel of Life Ministries. Welcome to our program. I'm joined by Janet Morana, our Associate Director. Janet, how are you?
I'm fine.
You know, African American women make up about 12% of the childbearing population, and yet they have over 1/3 of the abortions. And this is a topic that we want to talk about today because the pro-life movement and the effort to bring an end to abortion and restore protection to unborn children belongs just as much to our Black brothers and sisters as it does to us or anybody else. And this is something where, as you know, as we interrelate with pro-life leaders and groups around the nation, this is something that we're all concerned about, that our Black brothers and sisters not feel that this is our movement as opposed to theirs. This is rather a movement for basic human rights that belongs to everybody.
That's right. You know, there's a lot of groups out there. There's Day Gardner with the Black Americans for Life, and then there's Reverend Jim Good, who's with the National Black Catholic Apostolates for Life. So there are the African community, there is leadership up there that has sprung up, and they are part of the pro-life movement. Both of those people I just named are part of the National Pro-Life Religious Council, which I know, Father, you're the president of. So they're not kind of separated or isolated from the pro-life movement, they're inserted into it. The problem is they themselves are having difficulty getting the message out to even their own brothers and sisters in the African American community that we have a problem here, we have a crisis, and we're kind of assisting them in sounding the alarm.
Well, we've had on this program before Dr. Alveda King, the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, when Dr. King was living, he did not have to deal with this tragedy of abortion on the scale that we deal with it today. But Alveda King has always told us that were he around today, he would be working and fighting and marching with us for the lives of the unborn, because his message was one of the sacredness of the human person, the equal rights of everyone, and the fact that we cannot exercise violence against any individual because we're all made in the image and likeness of God. Well, that's exactly the message of the pro-life movement. And Alveda King, as you know, has on her website, which is kingforamerica.org, she has on her website a very beautiful section about why she stands up for the unborn, why she says that the great civil rights movement of our day is the pro-life movement, and she summarizes it by saying, how can the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, how can the dream survive if we murder the children? We're not passing on the promise of equality if we're killing the next generation. We also have a good friend who's a black pastor from the Northeast and is the head of another big organization that we're going to have here now on this program by inserting a tape that we recently made with him. Tell us about him.
Well, his name is Reverend Clenard Childress, and Reverend Clenard is the director of what they call the Life Education and Resource Network, but it's commonly referred to as LEARN. And they are reaching out all over the country through LEARN to black pastors in the African American communities to say, you've got to be better equipped to preach this message from the pulpit so that the people realize the damage that's being done to abortion, and also that the people who have participated in abortion realize that there's healing available. So we're very grateful to Reverend Clenard. He couldn't be with us in studio, but I was able to interview him recently.
Let's listen to what he had to say.
The African American community, how does the abortion issue really affect them?
Well, there's not one more issue that more or less that has been so deceptively portrayed to the African American community. Right now, there's 14 million African Americans missing since 1973, and more or less we don't understand that it has been abortion that has done more to demoralize or decimate our community than any other plague that's ever touched the church or the African American community. So it's up to the pastors at this point, I believe, to stop regressing on this issue, but basically be bold and use the pulpit. The pulpit has always been the means of communication in the black church. And if the pulpit is silent, the people are going to have a lack of knowledge. Hosea says, my people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. We make up only 12% of the population, but more or less 36% of all abortions. So that's a disproportionate amount of African Americans that are being victimized by the abortion industry.
Well, we know, during the time with Dr. Martin Luther King, he was quite effective in getting black pastors in the pulpits involved and engaged. How would you draw the parallel between the civil rights movement and that injustice to the black community and abortion?
Oh, they're directly parallel. The true civil rights movement today is the pro-life ministry. They are crying out for those who cannot cry out for themselves, those who have no rights. So the pro-life people, the pro-life members, the pro-life pastors are the vanguard. They're on the front line today and more or less are so imperatively important to any progress this nation makes, because simply our conscience are being seared at the fact that there are now over close to 44 million children since Roe versus Wade have been killed to abortion. So I see the African American community first has to wake up. Martin Luther King undoubtedly was a great leader. He was a prophet of his times and brought about social change. But the values of Martin Luther King are not upheld today. Martin Luther King said in his letter from a Birmingham jail that the early church stood up against such things as infanticide. I think that was a prophetic verse that he uttered back in 1963, not knowing how much it would play a part of today in 2004, that the first thing Martin Luther King commended the early church about, that they were willing to stand up and stop infanticide, where Romans basically left their children along the sides of the road, and at the penalty of death, if you touched if you touched any of those children, you were put to death. Well, the early church rose up and scooped those children up, raised them, and showed their sanctity of life values. Today, the black church especially is walking hand in hand with the abortion industry, but yet we claim to be of the same menu or the same venue of the civil rights movement of the 60s, and that's a false representation. Today's African American leadership does not reflect the values of the 60s.
So therefore you're saying if they really want to honor Dr. King, then they would speak up against abortion and that it's harming women, it's harming the African American community.
There was a post-abortive abortion study on African American women. 81% of them registered some type of complaint after their abortion. 55% said that they were crying or still going through depression. 60% said they felt guilty. These are African American women now.
Right.
But here's the scary one. 35% said they could not forgive themselves, which basically means indeed that they are living under the cloud of a post-abortive problem from their abortion and have more or less broken link with their God and Savior. Why do I say that? Because 70% of those African American women claim to be Christian. So the African American pastor has to realize there are women who are hurting in their pews and no one's saying anything. And a man is supposed to guard, guide, and govern. And the African American pastor especially is challenged to make sure that he fulfills that role that God gave Adam from the beginning. And we are failing miserably at guarding our women. And it's more of a male problem than it is a woman problem. It's men who are irresponsible, who will not step up and take their rightful place and guard, guide, and govern.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me, with the Roe v. Wade decision, you listen to the National Organization of Women and Planned Parenthood and NARAL. Those groups say that that empowered women, but what you're saying, Claude, really is it enslaved them.
Absolutely. And it enslaved them psychologically.
Right.
Now, if 81% of those women registered a complaint, that I truly believe the other 19% are just still living in denial. And our women today are suffering at an alarming rate. Since a disproportionate amount of those women are African American, it's up to the African American clergy and our politicians to bring this issue to the forefront. The NAACP erroneously and disgracefully endorsed the pro-abort stance this year for the first time. And I deeply regret ever having any affiliation with the NAACP after making that blanket statement, how they not only endorse the pro-choice, but basically what they're saying is we agree with the pro-abort doctrine. We agree with the 14 million African American children that are missing. This is absurd, and they need to be brought to the table on that, and they need to be more accountable.
Suppose our brothers and sisters listening today say, you know, Reverend Claude, the things you're saying, wow, I'd like more information about that. Those statistics you told us and all this information. I'd like to get this to some of my other friends in my community. How would they do that?
First of all, I'd like to say, as I believe Dr. Fran said this morning, we don't have to lie. Our statistics are true. They can find these things out for themselves. We have a website, blackgenocide.org, that is basically geared to bring out the deception of abortion on the black community. But there are plenty of resources that they can go to. There's many websites. We're linked to sojournertruth.com website. Most people don't know the agenda of the Planned Parenthoods and the abortion industry. By the way, the love of money is the root of all evil. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars in the community and billions of dollars in the nation. It always comes down to money. Usually, if you follow the money trail, you know what people are basically about. And we're being victimized. I believe there was a statistic since 1973, roughly $68 billion has been taken out of the black community. And needless to say, how much that could have been used to build up our cities, to more or less provide jobs. But the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood alone, during a 5-year span, I believe between 1998 and 2002, gross $454 million profit, and it's a nonprofit organization. And that's the blood of our babies. That's the blood of our children. And the pastor, the shepherd, has to say something. And the African American pastor has basically been silent, and we're going to have to give an account for that.
Right. Now, how can we get involved in political responsibility? very often the African American community, from what I see, either they're not registered to vote, they've checked out of the system, they're disgusted with it, or they just vote for one party, that's it. They don't really look at the fiber of the candidate or where they're standing on these life issues. How could you address that?
The key is, as you mentioned, we as responsible African Americans must begin to get the information to our people and stop giving the Democratic Party a blank ticket of our vote, more or less, just saying that we're going to vote Democrat regardless. That's foolishness. They do not have our values at this present time. They're upholding and trying to promote an agenda that is not ours, and we are responsible for our own vote. When you go into the voting booth, no matter what you said before, it's now you and God.
Right.
You know, it's you, God. The pastor's not there. Your wife, husband, child is not there. That's you and God. Where you pull the lever, more or less, depicts your own values and also depicts how you feel about your relationship with mankind and God himself. Right. And when I pull the lever, I have to pull the lever on the person who I feel reflects my values, right, and whom God can honor. And how can African Americans continually pull the lever on candidates who espouse the decimation of their neighborhoods is beyond me. It's a travesty. It's disgraceful. We must give an account. And so therefore the candidates that we pull the lever on must reflect our movement of the 60s, must reflect our values, must reflect our Lord. And then we can work with them. Nobody's perfect. All Americans who are not victimized by parties, but now realizing parties did not call us, God called us. Long before Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Green parties, there was the Word of God. And it was the Word of God that brought us out of our oppression. We must get back to that foundation.
You know, I always say if a politician can't respect the life of a little baby, how can he respect your life? And if he can get it right on the life issue, then usually they get it right on the other issues too. Because I know very often people are worried about education or housing. But I use the example that suppose a candidate was for terrorism. Would you ask them where they are on the other issues? So you wouldn't. You wouldn't even ask that question. So I think we have to focus our picture back on, and especially what you've told us today, Reverend Clenard, is the damage abortion is doing on a daily basis in the African American community. They've got to wake up. They've got to wake up and claim their heritage once again. And stand up. And I want to thank you for being with us, and I hope people will visit those websites. You want to just talk one quick those websites? That's
blackgenocide.org.
Right.
There's the Learn Inc. website, sojournertruth.com, and a host of others. The NPRC has websites. We all are using that medium now to get to, especially the younger generation. Us old folks don't want to go there, but we're going there and get the information, and it's readily available, and it's the truth. Right. We challenge people on the truth, and check out the statistics for yourselves. There's no reason for us to come here and lie. They've been lying to us too long, and it's time for the truth to be revealed.
Well, I'm always inspired by our friend Clenard, and I think that interview is something that's very important for all our African-American brothers and sisters to listen to.
That's right. You know, he points out the statistics, and you realize that Planned Parenthood is not the friend of the African-American community.
Well, people would not believe it if they read the words of Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood. She was an avowed racist. She talked about building a race of thoroughbreds, and she talked about the black community in terms of getting rid of them. I mean, and she went so far as to say that if they involved some of the, if they convinced some of the pastors, in the black community that abortion was a good thing, that this would be a way of calming the fears of some of the members of the community who might begin to become suspicious of what Planned Parenthood was trying to do. I mean, this sounds unbelievable, but her writings are there in black and white, available to this day for people to read.
That's right. And what they have to realize is that Planned Parenthood really looks to place their clinics in areas where the African-American community are. I mean, they're really being targeted, and this is why we need the pastors to speak out, to talk about the harm of abortion, the killing of the children, and the damage it's doing to women. because they really need to wake up to see this.
Well, you were mentioning before a number of our friends also who are leaders in the black community and who are leaders also at the same time in the pro-life movement. There are others too that we haven't mentioned, of course. Reverend Johnny Hunter was director of Learn prior to Clenard Childress, and he is still a great voice within his own community, and people like Damon Owens are also working with him, and Father John Raphael and priests like that. We have Star Parker, who is a great voice within the black community for pro-life, and many others, religious leaders as well as civic leaders. We need to always give more platform to these voices, it seems to me, because we're not saying that we want to go in and lead the black community in this particular way. They're quite capable of leading themselves to be involved in this movement, and that's, again, what we're saying. Sometimes there's the perception out there that the pro-life movement is a white Republican operation. Right. And I want to address that head on, because certainly there are whites involved and there are Republicans involved. The party has a pro-life platform. But when you think about the message of the pro-life movement, it fits in perfectly with what is considered to be democratic ideals. When you talk about fighting for the weak, the oppressed, the marginalized, making room, welcoming those who might otherwise be shunned and put to the side and forgotten. Who is more weak than the unborn child? Who is more marginalized? Now defined under the law, thanks to Roe versus Wade, as a non-person. Who is more vulnerable? What group of people are more regularly attacked and victimized and killed? The unborn child qualifies above and beyond anybody else as a vulnerable, marginalized segment of the population. Well, then why is a party that is trying to stand up for the weak and the poor not paying attention to these children? And this corresponds also to the spirituality and the morality of our black brothers and sisters. They're pro-life in their thinking. Unfortunately, the leaders in the Democratic Party have abandoned the unborn, and I don't know if everyone in the black community is recognizing this contradiction yet, although I think more and more of them are, thanks to the work of people like Clenard.
Well, also, too, I'd like our listeners to realize that if they would like to invite any of these people into their community that we've mentioned, they can contact us at Gospel of Life, and we will put them directly in touch with these people, because, you know, we need to bridge the gap that, you know, people in the pro-life movement who are white and people who are black are fighting the battle separately. No, that's not the case. We're fighting it together. We're one movement.
We are.
This is a human rights issue, so we're one in the fight, and we want them to be in touch with us.
Yes, and we know that Alveda King, who has been on these programs before, will also be willing to come to their churches, to their communities, to their organizations. She will come and speak. She will come and explain to people why the civil rights movement and the pro-life movement are really cut from the same cloth.
That's right.
You know, if you're going to stand up and say human beings are equal, no matter what the color of their skin, then you can also say human rights are equal no matter what the level of their development, or whether they are in the womb or outside the womb. What is the difference? Human rights are human rights, and the right to life begins right at the beginning, whenever life does begin, which, of course, as we know, is at fertilization.
That's right. Dr. Alveda King, Reverend Clenard, they see the urgency of this issue so much that they have dedicated themselves full-time to this movement and to getting the message out to the African-American community.
Well, thanks, Janet, and thank you, brothers and sisters. We want to call you to be dedicated to this movement, and please talk to your black brothers and sisters and let them know about the resources available to them and about the fact that this movement for life belongs just as much to them as to anyone else.
Father Frank Pavone has released a powerful book called Abolishing Abortion. It is a pro-life manifesto calling on both church and state to fulfill their responsibilities to the unborn. This book advocates principle without shortchanging us on the practical. Father Frank's new book points out that in the effort to end abortion, we are defending the same principle for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, and that therefore we can do no less. This book, this manifesto, is not for the faint of heart. It is a call to give our lives, and it is a roadmap to the best strategy and tactics in hastening the end of abortion, both on a personal and legislative level. Don't miss this pro-life manifesto, Abolishing Abortion, and order it by going to abolishingabortion.com or give us a call at 321-500-1000. And again, Abolishing Abortion, Father Frank will personally autograph it for you. So give us a call, 321-500-1000, or go to abolishingabortion.com. Thank you. Well, you know, I hope you'll want to be involved more with our African American outreach, as some people call it. We call it our Civil Rights for the Unborn here at Priests for Life. And we have Dr. Alveda King, who works full-time with us. She's been on our team since 2005. And when she first started, we called it our African American outreach. And now, over the past few years, Alveda has rebranded her work with us, with the Black community, to be called Civil Rights for the Unborn. And I hope you go to her special web pages, civilrightsfortheunborn.com. Again, civilrightsfortheunborn.com. Alveda would love to hear from you and maybe invite her to come to your community, especially in this important year. You know what Alveda's heart is? She wants to help the Catholic Black vote, especially. And she has a committee of people that have begun to get interested in this. So if you want to be involved, please go to prolifevolunteer.com. We have a special web page there. We have a political outreach person, Byron White, who would like to be in touch with you. And join our activities here, because this election, every vote is going to count to keep America the America we love and freedoms that we have, and also to bring protection to the unborn. Well, thank you for joining us again for this program. And again, Abolishing Abortion, Father's book, love to send that to you. Go to orders at priestforlife.org. Until next time, this is Janet Morana. Thank you, and God bless.